Hi, I'm Carrie Notari. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to present this short tutorial on photographing public art, and I look forward to meeting you on Wednesday when we tour some public artworks in Sarasota. This talk is all about discovering your photographic eye and personal vision and new ways of seeing and being inspired. This talk will be approximately 15 minutes long. We're going to talk about 6 key points, and I'll show you 6 of my previous photo shoots. First, we'll discuss composition, looking at images of Nikki de Saint Paul's sculptures taken at the Garfield Conservatory in Chicago. I'll show you 2 views of the same artwork and why one works better than the other. Second, we'll focus on close-ups with images I photographed of ice sculptures at Millennium Park in Chicago and talk about how to frame a photo to show your point of view. Then I'll talk about the concept of borrowed landscape with images of Dale Chihuly's glass at Garfield Conservatory. How photographing the art in its context and using those elements will enhance your images. Fourth, I'll talk about using images in new ways inspired with photos taken at the Berlin Wall. Fifth, I'll talk about the use of light at the Tiffany exhibit at Selby Gardens and how light is the most important element in a great photo. Sixth, we'll talk about creating portraits of people with outdoor sculptures at the Ringling Museum. Before moving to Sarasota, I lived in Chicago for 22 years, and I saw many great art exhibits. I was really inspired to photograph these art installations. In 2007, Garfield Park Conservatory featured the large-scale mosaic sculptures of the French artist Nikki de Saint Paul. I'm very interested in composition and often photograph a sculpture that intrigues me from different perspectives and various distances. Here, the second image is more successful and bolder because I moved in and removed any distractions. It's so easy to do with your iPhone because you can zoom in while standing in one place. I like to look at the edges of a frame and look at the negative space that exists between the artwork and the frame edge. I want that space to be activated. In the image on the left, it's too loose, and I feel like the plants take away from the sculpture. In the image on the right, I've incorporated the setting, but eliminated any distractions. When I approach a sculpture, I look at it from different vantage points and angles. I take multiple shots. I'm often looking for triangles and diagonal lines in a composition. The left image is good, but the right image is more dynamic because of the relationship among the figures and the triangle created. There are strong diagonal lines, sight lines that lead your eye back. The figures are energized in themselves, and the composition enhances that energy. If you've got a great sky, that's a bonus. You can work with the sky colors and clouds. The left image is good, and the primary colors of red, blue, and yellow are playful. But the right image is more interesting because as I was photographing, an L train happened to be passing. It has the blue and red colors of the sculpture, and it also gives the artwork a context so that you know it's Chicago. It was a fun happenstance, and I was excited to capture the moment. In these images, like the first set I showed you, the tighter frame is more successful. By moving closer to the subject matter, it creates an intimacy with the artwork, and there's just enough vegetation to give it a context. The background of greens sets off the bright colors of the sculpture. I want to show you the context of this next series. Here we are at Cloud Gate, or also known as the Bean, in Millennium Park in Chicago. There was a temporary exhibit called the Museum of Modern Ice that was on display in February 2008. The display was across from the bean. You can see the reflection of the colored ice display in the bean's mirrored surface. You can also see Frank Gehry's pavilion behind the display, so you have a sense of where it's located. This display is by the Canadian artist Gordon Halloran, and it's 95 feet long. Initially, I was disappointed with this ice wall display because it's so flat, and also the light was overcast that day. But I decided to make the best of it and started photographing close-up details of the colored ice and creating abstractions. Photography is a subtractive art. Your eye is constantly framing and editing pieces from the real world, versus painting, which is additive, where you are adding layers to a composition. I ended up liking these compositions a lot and had fun with it. The colors are really vibrant and luminous. It helped that it was an overcast day so that the light was very even with no shadows or highlights. This was a fun and different photo shoot and something that brightened up a wintry day. I liked working with the vertical lines and the chunky shapes. I felt like this was a successful photo shoot because I focused in and abstracted what I was seeing. Next, we'll talk about setting. In 2005, Dale Chihuly created his first exhibition of glass inside a greenhouse at the Garfield Conservatory. Here I want to talk about the Japanese concept of borrowed landscape called shake, which translates as borrowed scenery. It's a garden design technique that incorporates a distant view into the garden's composition. The concept of shake can be used to blend a building or sculpture with its surroundings. Chihuly blends his sculptures into the existing greenhouse setting. In my composition, I wanted to expand on and support his idea. Chihuly carefully thought out the placement of his glass sculptures. For me, it was more of an act of compositional discovery and how to best enhance his placements. I love how the yellow sculptures mimic water lotuses and how the blue waving glass tendrils mimic the cactus's weighty leaves. The bright colored glass is embedded into the garden, yet it really pops because of its shiny surface. The glass spikes were my favorite because they are so dramatic, and the red and purple colors contrast with the greens very well. Also, the light in the greenhouse was fantastic and created a lot of drama on its own. Traveling away from Chicago, we are now in Berlin, Germany. In 2005, I was invited to exhibit my work in a 3-person show with Art Exhibition Link at Gallery 24. While there, I visited the Berlin Wall Museum, which is a mile-long stretch of the original Berlin Wall. It's full of old and new graffiti, and graffiti is something I have photographed for years. This series is all about focusing on details and elements that I framed and edited from the original larger piece. There were so many great images on this wall. People from many different countries had added their art to this wall. I'm sure that now it looks completely different as it's a constantly evolving wall of paintings. In 2007, I decided to miniaturize some of these images using Adobe Photoshop. I then incorporated the graffiti images into jewelry, such as these earrings. Here's another example of the earrings. I ended up making and selling hundreds of earrings, necklaces, and bracelets. I called this collection Graffiti Bling. Here are 2 of the bracelets. People love the idea of having a small part of the Berlin Wall that they could wear. I also made artwork printed on canvas from the images. On the left is an exhibit that was displayed at the Artisan Shop at the State of Illinois building in Chicago in 2010. Just recently, last December, I participated in a group show at the SRQ East Art Studios in Lakewood Ranch. The exhibit was titled All Decked Out and featured art on skateboards. I collaged my graffiti images onto 2 skateboards. I thought that graffiti went very well with the theme of skateboarding. These are some examples of what you can do with your images beyond posting them on social media. Now I'd like to talk about light. The word photograph is made of two parts. The word photo means light, and the word graph means writing. So when you are capturing a photograph, you are writing with light. Light is the most important element of a photograph. Many of you saw this Tiffany exhibit at Selby Gardens. It was so fantastic because the stained glass pieces were very dynamic in the light-filled greenhouse. They played off the plants beautifully. I love the way the designers integrated the glass panels into the garden and layered the plants. It was almost overwhelming. I tried to work with composition, perspective, and light in the best way to show off this great display. Here the light coming through the greenhouse glass panels is dappled, and it gives the image a fragmented appearance that works well with the theme of stained glass sections. I love the use of space where the designers hung these giant butterfly wing stained glass pieces from the ceiling. I took many, many photos in this space, trying to get the best vantage point and working with the light available. With harsh, bright light, you will get a lot of shadows and details. Light can add depth and perspective, and a lot of the feeling of an image depends on the time of day you photograph, as well as the weather. My favorite light is bright, overcast skies, as it's a nice, even light where you can capture a lot of detail in your subject. Outside, there were some large-scale pieces, and I chose to photograph just a portion of this one to show off the colored shadow projected on the gravel. And the sky also added a bright blue element. Here, the strong sunlight was an advantage because it brightly lit up the ground below. I had fun photographing this banyan tree with the red plants. The designer's concept was to have the tree roots represent the stained glass camming, while the plants represent the glass. I decided to frame it so that the center trunk is dead center, while below it, the roots curve around in a sinuous way. The light is dappled and highlights certain areas and puts others in shadow, but it also activates the image and creates overall interest. Finally, we're going to talk about portraits. I'm going back to the 1990s when I was using black and white film and making prints in my darkroom. I photographed this little boy at Mabel Ringling's Rose Garden at Ringling Museum. Using the sculptures as props is a fun way to engage your subject. I directed him to interact with this little putty sculpture who is about his height. Then the photos unfold like a narrative and tell a story. In this photo shoot, we had fun with a lion sculpture about this young man's height. I think he was a little afraid of sitting on it, but I love his pouty expression. Rather than having the person stand next to the sculpture, I try to get them to interact with it. Also, using the portrait setting on your phone will give you more shallow depth of field, which will allow the background to fade and the foreground to be focused. The last photo I'll show you are more from Ringling. I tried to think of ways that my subject could interact with the sculptures. Also, if you notice, I don't have them looking at the camera. I want the portraits to be more candid and not so posed looking. So now it's time for any questions you may have. You can also ask me questions in person on Wednesday. Also, please remember to download the AutoCast app from the App Store and bring your phone on Wednesday. Thanks so much for attending my talk and listening. I look forward to seeing you soon.